let's get started with another deep dive.
Sounds good.
So you sent us a document all about Carlo Carafa. And at first glance, he seems like your typical, 17th century priest, right?
Yeah.
But not so fast. This guy's life, let me tell you, it's full of twists and turns and unexpected detours, really. Today we're going deep into the life of this Italian priest who ended up founding a whole religious community totally dedicated to charity, the Congregation of the Pious Workers. Now we're working with, like I said, these excerpts from the document you shared, Carafa1.pdf, and it's anything but straightforward.
Yeah, what's really fascinating is that his path to religious life, it wasn't a straight line at all. It's like he took the scenic route with a few, unexpected stops along the way.
Yeah, totally. So picture this. Young Carlo, just 16 years old, he decides to join the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. Pretty young, even for that time, right?
It really was. I mean, entering a religious order at such a young age, it suggests a strong sense of devotion. Maybe even, some pressure from his family, possibly. But then after 5 years, he has to leave due to ill health. Now, leaving a religious order back then, it wasn't exactly a common thing. It speaks volumes about the societal expectations and limited options available.
It's so interesting to think about that context. So what does he do after leaving? He joins the army. Talk about a 180.
Wow.
Why the army, do you think? Was he trying to prove something? Or was it maybe a practical choice in a society where options for someone who had left a religious order were probably pretty limited?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely adds another layer of intrigue to his story. I mean, we're talking about a time when military service was seen as a more, quote, conventional path, even if it was drastically different from his, initial calling.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we've got young Carlo, the soldier. But here's where things get interesting, I think. One day, he's walking past the Palazzo Reale di Napoli, and he hears these nuns chanting from the monastery of Regina Coeli. And this is where things take a dramatic turn.
It's like, in the sources, it's described as like a profound spiritual awakening, moment of transformation. It makes you wonder, what was it about the chanting that touched him so deeply? Was it the beauty of the music, the sense of peace and serenity, or perhaps like a recognition of a calling that he could no longer ignore?
I love that. A calling he could no longer ignore. Whatever it was, this experience completely changes his course. At 34, he decides to really hit the books, philosophy, theology, the whole 9 yards, ultimately leading to his ordination as a priest 5 years later.
Yeah. It's like those stories we hear today about people making radical career changes later in life. It's not a new phenomenon. Sometimes those aha moments come when we least expect them, and they lead us down paths we never imagined.
Totally. From this point on, he's all in on charity work.
And you have to understand the context here. This is 17th century Italy. Poverty was widespread. So acts of charity were absolutely crucial. We're talking providing food and shelter, caring for the sick, offering spiritual guidance. Religious orders, they played a huge role in all of this.
That makes a lot of sense. Right. So he's doing all this incredible work, and Cardinal Gesualdo is super impressed. So much so that he puts Carlo in charge of the Church of Santa Maria di Tutti i Beni. Now, I have to ask, was this a big deal?
Absolutely. Being entrusted with a church like that, I mean, come on, it was a sign of trust and recognition. This wasn't just some random assignment. He now had the authority and resources to expand his charitable work. We're talking a platform, the backing of a powerful figure. This was a game changer for him.
Wow, I didn't realize that. Okay, so he's got this platform, he's attracting followers, and in 1601, he's got 8 priests working with him. This is basically the unofficial start of the Congregation of the Pious Workers. Things are looking pretty good at this point, right?
You'd think so. But this is where things get really interesting. His path to officially establishing the congregation was not smooth sailing. He ran into some serious obstacles. He faced misrepresentation in Rome, which is a bit of a mystery.
Yeah, what was that all about? Any theories on what kind of accusations were flying around back then?
Well, we have to consider the religious landscape of the time. Think church politics, power struggles between different orders, a new group emphasizing charitable work. Some people might see that as a threat, Maybe they saw him as too radical or too disruptive to the established order.
Interesting. So it wasn't just rumors and stuff. He actually lost the church he was assigned to. Can you imagine putting your heart and soul into something only to be, kicked out?
It had to be devastating. Absolutely. I mean, building a community, creating a space for, worship and service, and then suddenly being forced out. Talk about a test of faith.
Yeah, definitely. And if that wasn't enough, many of his followers, those priests who were so inspired by him, they abandoned him during this tough time.
Yeah. It's a harsh reality of leadership sometimes. When times get tough, not everyone sticks around.
True. But, and this is really important, he didn't give up. He had 3 loyal companions who stuck by him. And they rented a house to continue their work.
It speaks volumes about Carafa's character, I think.
Yeah.
He wasn't driven by ego, or the need for recognition. He genuinely believed in the mission, in serving the poor and living a life of faith,
That's incredible.
It is.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground here. It's amazing how he managed to keep going despite all these setbacks, losing his church, followers abandoning him, and this mysterious misrepresentation in Rome. It really makes you think about what drove him,
It really does.
But we'll have to dive into that a bit more next time. For now, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
We'll be back soon with part 2 of this deep dive into the life of Carlo Carafa.
See you then.
It's remarkable, isn't it, how he just kept pushing forward.
His perseverance is truly inspiring.
Yeah, so let's dig into these challenges a bit more.
Yeah, sounds good.
Where do we even start?
Well, the sources highlight 3 major obstacles he faced after opening that church in 1601. First, we've got that whole misrepresentation issue, in Rome.
Right.
It's like we can only speculate about the specifics, but someone was definitely out to discredit him and his work too.
Yeah. Was it simply because he was new on the scene, shaking things up? Or were there, deeper motives at play, maybe political or theological even?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's a tough one to answer definitively. Okay, so moving on to the second obstacle. He loses the church, remember?
Oh, right.
Can you imagine pouring your heart and soul into building a community, creating this space for, worship and service, and then, bam, you're forced out?
Oof, yeah. It's got to be rough.
Logistically, it's a nightmare. And for morale, huge blow.
He didn't let it break him, though. He kept going.
True, he did.
Rented a house, continued his work with those 3 loyal companions,
Didn't give up on his vision.
Absolutely not.
And then there's the third challenge. This one, it might have been the most painful.
What's that?
Abandonment.
Abandonment.
By most of his disciples.
Wow, okay.
Facing external opposition is one thing, right?
Yeah.
But to have your own people, the ones you inspired, the ones you mentored, to have them turn their backs on you,
yeah,
that's got to sting.
Talk about a test of character.
It really highlights those, complexities of leadership.
For sure.
You're going to face doubt, criticism, sometimes even betrayal.
That's true. But you know what? Carafa's response, he just kept going, didn't let it define him or his mission.
He's like the embodiment of resilience. Think about it. He could have easily walked away.
Right.
But he chose to persevere, adapted to the situation, ultimately succeeded, established a congregation.
Wow.
It's a powerful lesson, I think,
right,
for anyone out there pursuing their goals, no matter what they are.
So true. Okay, so we've talked about his early life, his spiritual awakening, the founding of the congregation, the setbacks, his ultimate triumph. But there's one thing I'm still kind of curious about.
What's that?
Why did Carafa leave the Jesuits in the first place?
Good catch. The sources, they mention that he left the Society of Jesus at 21. Due to constant ill health, it was obviously a serious condition, serious enough to force him out of the order,
We know it was health-related. But what kind of illness could it have been? It must have been pretty severe to make him leave a religious order, especially when he joined so young.
It's hard to know for sure. Was it physical, mental, maybe both? And how did those years grappling with his health, how might they've shaped his worldview and his later dedication to service?
Yeah.
It's fascinating to consider how seemingly negative or challenging experiences can actually contribute to our growth.
Right.
Lead us to our true purpose.
Yeah. I like that. It's a good reminder. There are often these hidden layers to a person's story, things we may never fully grasp. But by digging deeper, exploring those nuances, we can gain a richer understanding of their journey, appreciate the complexities of human experience. So before we move on, I want to pause here for a sec and ask you, the listener, what stands out to you about Carafa's story so far? What resonates?
Hold on to that thought. We'll circle back to it after we delve into the next chapter of his life, his time in the army, and the events that led to his dramatic shift back to a spiritual path.
Ooh, yeah. This is where we see a side of Carafa that might surprise you. It's not all piety and charitable works, you know. There's adventure, intrigue, even a bit of mystery.
Ready to dive in?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's explore this period after he left the Society of Jesus, a time that's, shrouded in a bit of mystery. The sources don't really go into a lot of detail about his motivations for joining the army or what his experiences were actually like during that time.
It's like a missing piece of the puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah.
We can only speculate about what drew him to military life. Was it a sense of duty, a thirst for, adventure? Or maybe he felt the need to prove himself, his strength and resilience, especially after having to leave the Jesuits because of his illness,
It's possible.
Yeah.
Or maybe, thinking about the context of 17th century Italy, maybe it was the most practical option for him.
Yeah, true.
Career choices back then, they weren't exactly abundant, especially for someone who had, left a religious order.
Right.
Whatever his reasons were.
Yeah.
It's safe to say that this period probably played a significant role in shaping who he became.
Like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah.
The military, with its, discipline and challenges, it could really hone his leadership skills, his resilience, his ability to persevere.
Yeah, definitely.
Qualities that would later be, essential in founding and leading the congregation.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's that pivotal moment, the turning point.
The one that brings him back.
Yes. Picture this. Carafa, the soldier. He's passing by the Palazzo Reale di Napoli. Suddenly he hears this sound. Nuns chanting. From the monastery of Regina Caeli. It stops him right in his tracks.
Wow. It's like a scene from a movie. You can almost feel the weight of that moment.
Yeah.
What was it about the chanting that had such a profound impact?
The sources? They describe it as a, transformative experience. And what's really interesting is that it wasn't a grand vision or some dramatic event. It was simply the sound. Human voices raised in prayer. That touched his soul and changed the course of his life.
Incredible. Was it the beauty of the chanting, the peace and serenity coming from the monastery? Or was it something deeper? A reawakening of, a spiritual yearning that he'd suppressed during his time in the army?
It's hard to know for sure, but the impact, it's undeniable.
Yeah.
At 34, he makes this decision to dedicate his life to the church. Dives headfirst into studying philosophy and theology. Spends 5 years immersed in those subjects.
5 years?
5 years, before finally being ordained as a priest.
That's amazing. Talk about dedication, switching gears so dramatically at that age.
Yeah.
Devote himself to such, rigorous study.
It speaks to his passion, for sure. His determination.
Like he was finally stepping into his true calling.
Exactly. And from that point on, his path is clear. He dedicates himself to charitable works and founding the congregation.
Wow.
It's incredible to think how those seemingly, disparate experiences, this Society of Jesus, the army, that moment with the nuns, they all converged, shaped the man he became and the legacy he left behind.
It's a reminder that our lives, they aren't linear.
No.
We zig and zag, we take detours, we encounter unexpected events that change our trajectory. And sometimes it's those twists and turns that lead us to where we're meant to be.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Carlo Carafa's life, I'm filled with awe at his resilience, his unwavering faith, his dedication to serving others.
Yeah. And I'm struck by the power of transformation, how a single moment, a sound, an encounter, it can shift our whole perspective, set us on an entirely new course. Carafa's story, it's an invitation, I think, to embrace those unexpected turns in our own lives, to listen for those whispers of calling, and to trust that even when the path seems uncertain, there's a greater purpose unfolding.
Beautifully said. And to our listener, we'll leave you with this final thought. Think about a time in your own life when a seemingly random event sent you down a new path. How did that experience shape who you are today?
Carafa's story reminds us that our journeys are rarely straight lines, and even setbacks can lead to unexpected growth and fulfillment. So we left off with Carafa, totally changing his life's direction after hearing those nuns chanting. It's amazing how one small thing, like a sound, can have such a huge impact, right?
Yeah, it really is.
But before we get into that, let's go back to something you mentioned earlier about his work with the poor.
Right, his charitable work.
Yeah, it's crucial to understand the impact of that, right?
Absolutely. And to fully grasp it, we need to consider the context.
Okay.
He was working in 17th century Italy, remember? During the Counter-Reformation.
So Counter-Reformation, can you give us a little background on that?
Sure. It was a period of Catholic revival and reform, really, in response to the Protestant Reformation. One of the key aspects of it was this renewed emphasis on social justice. and service to the poor.
Interesting.
Yeah, so new religious orders, like Carafa's congregation, they were popping up all over Europe, dedicated to serving those in need.
So Carafa was part of this larger movement.
Exactly. His work, it wasn't just about individual acts of charity. He was part of a broader effort to address social issues and renew the church's commitment to helping the poor and marginalized.
Wow, that really puts his work in a new light. It wasn't just him doing good deeds, he was part of something much bigger.
Exactly, a social and religious transformation.
Yeah, and that context, I think, it's key to understanding his lasting impact. Years after his death, he was declared servant of God. And later, the Venerable.
That's right.
Those are pretty significant titles, right? In the Catholic Church, I mean. What do you think led to those recognitions? Did his congregation have that much influence?
Well, for a person to be declared a servant of God, there needs to be evidence that they lived a life of heroic virtue. And for the Venerable, it requires a deeper investigation into their life and writings.
I see.
So it seems likely that the congregation, it continued to thrive after Carafa's death, carrying on his mission, making a real difference in people's lives, that kind of lasting impact in the community and the church. It definitely would have contributed to his reputation for holiness.
It's amazing to think about. The work he started just kept going, making a positive impact, even long after he was gone.
It's a testament to his vision and the dedication of those who followed him.
And it reminds us that even when we face setbacks, and even when those closest to us lose faith, our commitment to something, it can have a ripple effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, to wrap up this deep dive into Carlo Carafa's life, we see this man who took such an unusual path, faced so many challenges, and ultimately left a legacy of service and compassion.
His story, it's, full of twists and turns, from the Jesuits to the army to that moment with the nuns.
It reminds us that our lives aren't always straightforward, right?
Some out there not.
We may take detours, face setbacks, have experiences that seem totally unrelated, but they all shape who we become.
And just like Carafa found his calling, through those unexpected turns, maybe those seemingly random events in our own lives are leading us toward our own purpose.
That's a great thought to leave on. To our listener, we'll leave you with this. What seemingly unrelated experiences in your own life might be converging to lead you towards your purpose? What unexpected turns have shaped who you are today? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.